Good evening, everyone. Please let me know whether you could hear me and see me. Okay, I think people have confirmed that they can hear me and see me. Good evening to all of you. I just want to mention that this program today will be conducted in English. However, මම මේක බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා මේ වෙබිනාර් එක මේ වැඩමළුව සිංහලෙන්ුත් පවත්වන්න තව සුමානකින් විතර කවුරු හරි කැමැත්තක් දක්වනවා නම් සිංහලෙන් මේ වැඩමළුවට සහභාගී වෙන්න කරුණාකරලා අපිට මේ දැනුම් දෙන්න. Right. So today it's about the business migration that I'm going to talk about. It's a webinar, and we will have plenty of time to have questions and answers. I will run the presentation initially. There won't be any slides, but I would be also we are on Facebook Live. A bit of housekeeping. If you could please confine your communication to Q&A rather than chat at any given time. So this program would run for about an hour, depending on how we go for time. And then I will have plenty of time for questions and answers. So I'm Sanji Caldera, and today I'll be joined by a panel of my staff who are specially in business migration. We have been practicing migration law for the last 17 years, and I'm a MARA registered agent, and we also have a few staff members who are registered migration agents. Why I do business migration and the skills that I have achieved is through two streams. The fact that I've studied migration law, and I'm also an accountant, both in Australia and UK. A very brief description of our practice. So we have our head office in Melbourne. We also have an office in Sri Lanka, in Caldera Road, and we also have an office in Dubai. So we have teams on each of these offices. However, due to the nature of the confidentiality, we confine the business migration program to be run by the head office that's in Melbourne. And we have very qualified staff, including myself, who come from financial and accounting backgrounds. So let's see, what is business migration? Business migration has been there for a very long time in Australia. What it does is it attracts entrepreneurs from world over, from every part of the world, who have had business experience in their own country, run successful businesses. They invite these entrepreneurs to come to Australia and perform their business activities, giving them all the opportunity, the infrastructure to run a business in Australia, which certain criteria, once they meet, then they qualify for permanent residency, which I will talk about in detail. So the business migration is in two stages. First, we call the subclass 188 series. There are many different aspects of business migration, but today we concentrate on the innovation stream. And then Once you qualify for that, you will be given a visa without any restriction up to 5 years for you to come to Australia with your family and conduct business activities, meet the criteria, which again I will discuss in detail, which will lead to permanent residency. And after 1 year, you can also apply for citizenship. There are many stakeholders in this process. You as the applicant who may be looking at this program to come to Australia, and should you engage our practice to handle this business migration program. We have another stakeholder there, the Department of Home Affairs, who will finally make the decision whether you meet the criteria and to issue the visas at both stages. But there is a very, very important player in this process, and it's called the state government. A little bit about the state government is Australia has states and territories. They are governed by their own parliament, their premiers, and they run like almost like different countries. So when we talk about business migration, we need to go through the state government, fulfill their requirements before we apply for a visa. And from state to state, the rules and regulations can be different, but it is within the framework of the Department of Home Affairs business migration criteria. So let's look at it. What is the qualification? How do I qualify? The first question, the three questions that I normally ask: how old you are. There is a limitation of the maximum age for business migration. At the first stage, it's 55 years of age. However, there are exceptions. If you are older than 55 and you can bring exceptional benefits to the state, which will be looked at on a case-by-case basis, we may have certain applicants who are older than 55 years of age who can successfully make an application. Age will not be a barrier in the second stage when you come to Australia and start a business and when you apply for your permanent residency. You need to meet these criteria only at the first stage. The second most important thing is your businesses in your own country. What was the turnover in your businesses? We can, if it's one business, the turnover of that business. If you have multiple businesses, we could consider the turnover of the two of the largest companies that you would have. So it's either one company or up to two companies that you can include in the turnover requirement. And the minimum turnover requirement is the equivalent of 750,000 Australian dollars. So what it means is that your turnover of one or two businesses should be 750,000 Australian dollars. And this $750,000, there are, because of COVID, we know that in 2022 financial year, which would have ended on 31st of March for Sri Lankan business people and or any other fiscal year for people from other countries, could have been lower than 2021 or 20. So they give the opportunity of picking up the two best years in the last 4 years and demonstrate whether you have got a turnover of more than $750,000, and that will be measured at the prevailing exchange rates. When I say prevailing exchange rates, the exchange rates that prevailed at that time of your business operation. Now comes a very important point, is ownership. the ownership of the business within the family, it can be the main applicant and the spouse and the immediate family members, should be more than 30% shareholding in a limited liability company, 30% partnership ownership in a partnership. Of course, when it comes to a sole proprietorship, that doesn't matter because the applicant holds the business 100%. So we have got two criteria that we talked about: under 55 years, 750,000 Australian dollars turnover, and then they measure your wealth. But when they look at your wealth, they look at the last 2 financial or fiscal years. For example, a Sri Lankan entrepreneur will be looking at their wealth on the 31st of March 2022 and the wealth on 31st of March 2021. And what is wealth? I can break it down into 4 different main areas. The first being the land and building owned by the applicant and the applicant's family. When I say family, it is the spouse and the children, not their parents, brothers, and sisters. It's the main applicant, spouse, and the children. The value, the market value, it's not what you bought at. It's the market value as at the 31st of March 2022 and at 31st of March 2021. But it will be converted to Australian dollars on the exchange rate prevailing on those 2 dates. Now, what is the second is investments, shareholdings in stocks, where you buy shares in the stock exchange, money in the bank, fixed deposits. That will also be looked at to create this figure for wealth. And the third element would be the net asset value of your business, adjusted to any loans taken or granted. That's a fairly accounting calculation. So if you look at your balance sheet, you have a net asset figure, you have a certain shareholding, that's your money, plus whatever you have lent to the company, minus whatever you have borrowed from the company. So that's another figure. And the fourth element is other assets that you could own. We call it your provident fund, your employer's provident fund, EPF, your ETF, or any insurance policy that can be cashable. Now, there are 2 kinds of insurance policies. You take an insurance cover for your life and critical illness or whatever it is, but it's the insurance that you put money every month or every year where you can cash it any given time. So that is taken. We don't take personal motor vehicles because they are depreciable items. We don't also take jewelry and gold and so forth, because it's very difficult to prove ownership. Now, this wealth should be how much? It should be equivalent to 1.25 million Australian dollars, again calculated at the prevailing exchange rates. 31st of March 2022 and 31st of March 2021. So we go through these analyses together with our clients and build up those worksheets. And sometimes, interestingly, when we work these figures, they themselves, applicants would know what their wealth is, really, which they may not think about. So that's interesting. So I'll go back to the main criteria. It has to be, whatever the company, it has to be more than 30% or more ownership over the last more than 2 years, age under 55 years, minimum turnover of 750,000 Australian dollars it can be used the best 2 years in the last 4 years. Then your wealth, 1.25 million, which comprises of those 4 sections that I was talking about, but that in the last 2 fiscal years. Interesting. So will that give you a visa? Will that give you a business? No, it's not as easy. That was the exact criteria, the baseline criteria for business migration. However, you're also subject to a points test. Interesting. We have all heard about this points test, but it's quite different to the general skill migration points test. Generally, a person who meets those thresholds of the $750,000 turnover and 1.25 million, generally they do tend to meet the required 65 points. How are points calculated? I won't go into detail, but I will tell you the areas how the points are calculated. The first is turnover, but I did say $750,000. So what happens is if your turnover is more than 750,000 and let's say 1.25 million, you get extra points. If it's perhaps 1.75 million, it might be. So we have blocks. The higher the turnover of the block, the more points you accumulate. And then, excuse me, the points are given to age. So there is an increase as when your age increases, the points, the younger entrepreneurs, the points decrease. So we calculate the number of points. And then we give points for qualifications, bachelor's degree but there are certain criteria how they give. And for how many years of business experience you have, that's points for that too. And up to a maximum of 7 years would give you a very high amount of points. Then there are some special categories. If you are an exporter and you have derived your turnover of 50% turnover from exports, you get more points. One of the questions that people ask me is English essential for business migration? There are 3 aspects of it. If you undertake an English exam, there may be points for that. If you don't undertake undertake your English exam, or you have an average of what we call functional English, which you undertake, that meets the criteria. But certain entrepreneurs come and say, no, I don't have time to sit this English exam. But then what happens is you have to pay a significant amount to the department in order to get an exemption for English. For a couple, for their husband and wife, the main applicant can be up to 14,000 Australian dollars. So I said, look, I'm sure you could go and sit and do the exam. Everybody will pass this 4.5 average or whatever it is and save yourself a lot of money. But I leave that to the applicants. So what we do, we sit down with our potential clients and go through this point system to see whether they meet the points. Now comes, this is, excuse me, I was talking about the state government involvement. The state governments have their own regulations. The Department of Home Affairs want you to get 65 points for your business migration application. However, Victoria might say I want 80 points, or South Australia might say 85 points. So they change it all the time. And also they'll say that you need to have business experience in these fields. So I'll briefly touch on the most popular state being Victoria, Melbourne, where a lot of Sri Lankans do come. Victoria was a very popular destination. Majority of my clients come from a Sri Lankan background, so obviously my clients have been majority Sri Lankans, the first thing is I want to go to Victoria, Melbourne, or whatever the area. And we could do that. But about 2 years ago, they started making it very difficult for migrants. They said, you need to have a bachelor's degree, you need to have English, you need to be in what we call STEM qualification, you have to be involved with science, technology, engineering, mathematics, all that thing. So we assisted many clients to go to Queensland. But we have come great news. The latest requirements, they change the requirements every 1st of July, was that, in fact, you could apply for Victoria on 3 conditions. One, if your turnover was in your own country was $1.75 million, but the threshold is 750,000. But if you say that my turnover is more than $1.75 million, you will get through. Then if you have bachelor's degree in certain fields of specialization, that would be, I'm not talking about each one of them. Either your turnover will be 1.75 million or you have a bachelor's degree. And if you're an exporter, you could qualify, of course, subject to the points too. But it's very important to know that as much as you have these requirements, we work through this process, saying where do you fit in, which state, how many points, all that, that I discuss right up front what the state's expectations are. Generally, you could do any business, any type of business, which are active, not passive. You can't sit in Melbourne and say, I'm going to get some from China to Sri Lanka. No, that's passive. Or I can't suddenly say, I'll buy a land, build a house, sell it, and get that turnover and meet the requirements for the permanent residency. So there are some requirements which we guide you through. But generally, it's quite open. But we have a certain trend with the state governments, not that it's essential, but there are trends, especially in Victoria, is they would like you to transfer the skills that you have to Victoria. So if you are in electronics, or you are in engineering, or if you are in trade, that you transfer, it doesn't have to be the same business. It does not have to be the same business. It is the same field. So they know that you're bringing some skill set to Victoria. And they also are quite particular that what you bring here is some kind of innovation. Now, when you do come to Australia, there are 3 ways of starting businesses. You can start something from scratch. That's your business. You start from scratch. Or you could buy a shareholding in another ongoing business and develop that. Or you can buy a complete the organization. There's a lot of organizations at various different prices, depending on the size of their business, for sale. Now, I'll touch on Queensland. Queensland is also quite relaxed in the type of business that people bring to their state. However, they have some specific rules that other states don't have. And one of the rules that they want is that they want to see, I don't know how they monitor this, that $1.25 million have been brought to their state. That's that during this time that you have your business visa and you're running a business, that they want 1.25 million Australian dollars brought to their state. You can't say to their state, really, when you bring it to a bank account, it can be brought to Australia, but that's what they are. Now, when we do apply for these particular visa, it takes approximately about 1 to 1.5 years, or perhaps sometimes a little bit more, for you to get your visa. But once you get that visa, it's for the family, and it's for 5 years. And you can do whatever you want. If you want to use the 5 years and not do anything about it, that's fine, but then you will not qualify for your permanent residency. So during these 5 years, they expect you to reside in Australia for 3 years. Not that they can't come back or something, you just call Australia home. So you can start on the first year, or perhaps on the second year, or perhaps on the third year, but stay for 3 years. And what the expectation is that from state to state is different. Victoria wants people to stay here for a longer time, at least one person who's going to be the main applicant. By the way, the applicants can switch. So if the male party was the main applicant back in Sri Lanka and had all the requirements, and they come to Australia, but let's say the husband has to go back and run their business in Sri Lanka, and the wife takes over, and the wife can be the main applicant for the second stage. So one of the things is that I said that they need to come to Australia, start a business, buy a business or buy a shareholding of business, and get on with their operation. Because the children can go to school. If you want to work in another organization, still you can do that. There are no restrictions. But then we need to meet the 888 requirements, what we call 888, the permanent residency requirement. So one of the things I talked about is 3 years you have to live in Australia, or 3 years you need to hold the visa before you apply. So you don't have to wait for 5 years, but you have to run the business for 2 years. Let's say that if you run the business for the first 2 years, within that first 3 years, you have held the visa for 3 years, started the business right away, you can apply for your permanent residence. You don't have to wait for the 5 years. It is a business that needs your attention on a day-to-day basis. It's not where you sit in a complete different location, but you have to be actively involved in business. The whole purpose is that the state governments have come, they have very strict quotas. So that's why they will choose the best of people to come to their state and allow you to run the business. So you are in Australia, you are undertaking a business with these 5 years, and you need to meet some basic requirements. Now, this is the point the state government comes back again and gets involved. How do they get involved? Is that they like to know what's happening. So you come to Australia and they will send you some surveys, and they'll, of course, assist you too in setting up the business if it's needed. But we do that as a part and parcel of our service on the first stage. So you engage us on twice. One, when you want to get the visa to come to Australia, and then once you achieve all those things in Australia, when you apply for the second stage. But from the time that you apply for the first time and to the time that you apply for the second time, I would be advising, even after you get the visa, they're all the time, they will be having meetings with me. I started this, or should I start this, or how am I progressing? Am I on track to for the PR and all that? But we will engage, we'll have another term of engagement at the time when we apply for the second stage. Now, what do you have to do? What are the basic requirements that you have to achieve in order to get your permanent residency? There are 3 things. Now, these 3 things are again what the Department of Home Affairs requirements are. It is what they look at is you run the business for 2 years, but they will only look at the last 12 months of operation. It's not very hard because you run the business for 2 years, you start, slowly get your business going. So you can run for even 3 or 4 years, but you have to run the business for minimum 2 years, but they will be looking at this the last 12 months of operation, not the financial year, last 12 months. So if you think in the second year you don't meet the requirements that I'm going to talk to you about, you can meet in the third year, so long you look at the last 12 months. In the last 12 months, they expect you to meet 2 of the 3 conditions that I'm going to talk about. That first condition, your wealth in Australia should be $600,000 right across the last 12 months, minimum. And what can you include into your wealth? The same 4 points that I talked about at the first stage. Your land and building, money in the bank, investment, shares, portfolios, fund deposits. Third one is the net assets value of the businesses in Australia. Now, remember, when we talk about the second stage, it's all about Australia. You can't include any of your assets, nor your business interest or turnovers, which you have overseas. These are what you achieve in Australia. 600,000 worth of wealth. That includes the net assets too of the business. And the second stage is that right through the last 12 months that you should have had net assets of 200,000 in the business. And once again, depending on your shareholding, net assets equal whatever the percentage to net assets, and any loans taken or given will be adjusted and be achieved at a 200,000 at the beginning of the 12 months and at the end of the 12 months before you apply for your visa. And the third one is that you have employed 2 full-time employees or equivalent. So one employee works for 40 hours a week, second employee works for 40 hours a week, that's 80 hours. But let's say that 10 people part-time, it's a restaurant. They have part-time work in Australia, is very famous for part-time work. It adds up to 80 hours per week you have given employment to. Those 80 hours can be counted for only people who are permanent residents and citizens, and none are family members. Obviously, it can't be family members because you're on a business visa. So they have to be permanent residents or citizens, but you can employ other students, temporary workers, all that. But we have to prove that 80 hours per week for the 12 months, you have given work to permanent residents or citizens. But going back, I said only 2 requirements. Either the 600,000 and the 200,000 net assets, then you don't worry about employees. Or it's the 200,000 net assets and 2 employees, or perhaps 600,000 assets and 2 employees. We have to be very mindful. That's the Department of Home Affairs requirement. But what we have to work through is what we promised the state government at the time of applying for the 188, what we'll come and do. We said we are running this particular business, we are going to invest this amount of money, minimum, as per their requirements. You should meet those requirements too. They may have 2 employees, mandatory, so you have to have the 2 employees, or 1 employee. It is from state to state. They may insist that you have to have a certain, turnover level, certain investment in the business, which quite would be more or less to the Department of Home Affairs. But so we have to work through that, because when we are ready to apply for your permanent residency, we need to go back to the state government and say, look, we promised what we did, what we promised, we have done what we have promised, I'm sorry. But let's say when you come to the state and you want to change your business, that's fine, but we have the dialogue with the state government. And one very important thing, when you do apply for your permanent residency, you can't suddenly stop and say, okay, I met all the conditions, I'm going back, I want to get my PR. No, you can't. You have to continue to run the business, but they won't measure any performance, but the business has to be run. It will be only managed at the period, the last 12 months, not what has happened after, but they will want to know whether the business is continuing. Now, I want to tell a little bit about what do we do in this whole process. We make it easy. That's what migration agents are, not to fill up a form and put it. It's much more to that our team will do for the applicant and make it easy. And by the way, everything is digital. Everything. You don't have hard copies or photocopies or anything like that. We guide you step by step and have a lot of discussions. Choose the state, choose your investment, and we work with that. And we have an excellent business migration team headed by our general manager and our team. They're all very highly qualified. And one important thing I need to tell you is we maintain a very, very strict level of confidentiality. We get most of our work are through referrals. And if anyone who doesn't know us and want to come and have a chat, and if they go through the initial process and they're ready to start, but they want some assurance that, that Sanji Caldera Associates is genuine, then of course we will refer successful people who are willing to give a reference for us and have a chat about how the working work and so forth. You will also have a dedicated relationship manager who would answer your questions, and when they have more complex situations, to bring it up to me and have Zoom or telephone discussions at pre-arranged times. Then we also, we are migration consultants and of course also accounting backgrounds. We don't know everything about business, but after living in Australia for 35 years, I've also worked in the Australian tax office for many, many years and worked in public accounting practice. So I bring in a lot of knowledge in order to guide them on what they should be doing in Australia. But we also have business advisors. They're very specialized business advisors who assist us in preparation business plans under our guidance, and also to present certain cases to the state government. They're very specific. When they ask a question, it's not a yes or no answer. I'll take an example. How do you transfer your skills to Australia? Why do you think that you're going to be successful? Things like that, which needs very detailed responses. We have our business consultants in Australia who will assist us. And I will certainly be involved. There are so many times that people have been nearly getting into difficulties, trying to buy the wrong business or trying to deal with the wrong people. I will always advise you, direct you to an accountant, direct you to a solicitor to handle all those things. And I said, it's confidentiality. The other matter is that we don't just get your visa and say, okay, you've got your visa to come to Australia and don't worry, it's up to, that's end of our service. No, we will guide you right up to the time. So our initial engagement professional fees, which is in 7 different parts, as and when we go, as and when we achieve, will also include guidance to the AAA, that's permanent residence stage. And so that's basically, I've taken about 40 minutes for this presentation. I want to have given you the opportunity to ask any other questions. I will also be sharing a screen at the end of this presentation to, if you're in Sri Lanka, where to contact. If you're in Dubai, whom to contact, or in Sri Lanka, because they will collate some information and give it. They won't be asking for any personal information, but they will do the introductions. They would arrange initial discussions and so forth. And we could open the floor. I'm sure you'd have plenty of questions. and open the floor for any questions. The process of, as though you know where to contact us and ask those questions and satisfy yourself whether you would like to migrate to Australia. It's a country of great opportunities. As we know, if I feel that there is quite a big Sri Lankan sort of participants in this group and this webinar, rest assured that they would have lots of friends and family, and they may have visited Australia to know running a business is no impediments. You can run whatever the business that you want lawfully in Australia and meet the requirements of various governments and bodies. Right. So have I covered everything? Yes. And I would like to also mention that when I talked about Victoria, but all the governments, New South Wales, they're very much specific to what we call technology. They want 80 points. And South Australia, that's where we talk about Adelaide, also wants 80 points. I'm sorry, in New South Wales, it's 85 points. But if you were to run a business in main Sydney, it's Sydney area and the suburbs, requirements are a bit more. If you say that I'm willing to go regional, then the requirements are much less. Western Australia, Perth is participating, the Northern Territory, the ACT, the Canberra government, Tasmania. So all these states are participating and they have their quotas, they have their own sort of rules and regulations. Now, there are people who will come and tell me, my daughter is studying in Adelaide, I want to go to South Australia. While she's studying, I want to run my business and we all get our permanent residency. Right, excellent. Thank you for patiently listening to that. I know that you couldn't get all that into your mind about what it is. So we'll go to some questions and answers. Right. I would have for confidentiality, I will even though the surname is there, I will only refer to you as your first name, right? And Niranjan has a lot of questions. If I will answer certain of those questions, because sometimes certain questions may need a little bit of more detail. And at the very onset, he said we have a string of questions. Okay. If you secure state's nomination as a state government sponsorship, what are the percentage of visa success of federal chances of visa refusals? We have 100% approval rate after we get the state government sponsorship. Look, the Department of Home Affairs are very, very reasonable. You do give them the correct information. We make sure that you have the requirements, the visa will be granted, subject to your health, your past your health, subject to your character, your police checks. Yes, I can proudly say it is, because it's not something that we take lightly. A lot of effort goes into it. Can we extend our 188 visa after 3 or 5 years if you couldn't fully? Absolutely. But you should have tried. So the question is, in that 5 years, if you can't meet the 888 PR requirements, you could, but you need to have tried. You can't say that I waited 5 years and completely forgotten about it and can I have an extension? No, there are specific requirements to extend it because you are not met the criteria of the 600,000. Yes. Can we sponsor others via employer-sponsored visas once you set up? Absolutely. If so, what requirements needed to secure a sponsor license? No, there are no requirements. It's just that, does your company run a genuine operation? Can you justify the person who is going to sponsor? right? It's not like a small mom and dad company wants an accountant or something, but can you justify the requirement? And I'll have to touch on something because that question is about employer sponsorship, is that you also have to prove that you can't find any employees to do that particular job in Australia. It's an academic exercise, but you still have to go through. What happens if our visa, yeah, so if your visa, I said, I'll make, okay, if your visa is refused, if you're if you apply offshore, you don't have review rights at the tribunal, administrative appeals tribunal. But you'll ask me, how can you get a visa? How can you apply onshore? You can, because you might come on a holiday visa, and there will be requirements when there'll be no further stay, and you've got the sponsorship, you've got the invitation from the government. That's one thing that I want to mention. The state government sponsorship comes together with an invitation from the department. So they let the immigration department say, please issue an invitation, and we have 60 days to apply. So if you're offshore and your visa is refused, you don't have traveler rights, but you certainly can take it to federal court and fight the case if you think the department has made a mistake. But if you're onshore and you are on a bridging visa because you're onshore, you applied for it when you are in Australia, you have review rights, and that's called the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. They're very fair. They will only hear your side to a story and find out exactly. But on a matter of law, if you have been refused, tribunal is not going to help you. If it's a matter of things like interpretation, I was running the business, here is my proof, and the department said, no, I don't think you ran the business, your wife ran the business, or somebody else ran the business. Arguable situation. That's where a visa could be refused. So that is why what we make sure that's one of the cases, like if you say you've been running a business for 5 years, we will want a lot of documents before we go and claim that you have worked for 5 years. Signatures, check signatories, emails, letters, contracts, to say that you were running the business and you took strategic direction to run the business. Dependent kids, education options and costs. They would, excuse me, pay international. From state to state, it will be different. So public schools can be free for some, and some you may have to pay a fee, but it is affordable. But if you are sending the child to a private school, then it doesn't matter anymore because everybody pays the same amount. Impact of fundraiser restrictions of Sri Lanka, how to overcome. So that is something that it is for you to look into. Of course, there are various methods officially to raise funds. You might be running, doing businesses in more countries like Singapore and Dubai, where your funds can be transferable, and so forth. Total cost of your services, I think it's a bit premature for me to discuss that. It will be something that when we look at the case and which state, we might, we will of course give our cost structure up front and for people to work with. Right. As I said, I won't talk about the surname. I'm sorry, I'm looking at some, if I've got any other questions also coming through on my phone, but Varuni, your question is, to my stage in this migration process, I'm in the final stage of my 888 visa. I'm not too sure what the question is. You have made a statement, please retype that and ask me the question. Happy to answer that. When there's a dollar shortage, anonymous, that's fine. When there's a dollar shortage in the country, how is the rupee of 1.5 million Australian rupees got to be transferred? As I said, I answered that question. You may already have investments. There are many people actually who come to me who have already sometimes have companies here, sometimes have bought property and so forth, and before, and those can be used to prove that you are going to invest. Because I was telling you, other than Queensland, you don't have to prove that you have transferred funds. What you have to show is that you have the 600,000 or you have the 200,000 in your business process. Right. Can the main applicant work in another company whilst she on a 188 visa? Yes, you can. But remember that the main applicant also have to prove that they have been hands-on with the and on an almost full-time basis with the company, which we call main businesses, which qualify, one or two businesses, which will qualify the triple eight. So we have another question. What's the percentage of business I have to own for 888 visa? Thank you for that question. There is a point that I overlooked. I said the requirements were the $600,000 assets. I told the $200,000 net assets. I talked about the 2 employees and 2 of these 3. But hang on, I missed the most important point. What's the turnover? So this question is the percentage on the turnover. And answer that is, if you hold 51% or more in the business in Australia that is you're using to get the 888 visa, you need to have a turnover of at least 300,000 in the last 12 months that we are talking about. If your percentage ownership, because I told you you might have bought into another company, is between 30% to 50%, then your turnover should be $400,000, the turnover for the last 12 months of operation. It can't be anything under 30%. Excellent question. Can I change the proposed business after I arrive to Australia? Yes, like I did mention, we would always encourage, and we will be coordinating and saying, look, when we applied, we felt there was business opportunities. The visa took 1.5 years to get. Things have changed. We are present with better business opportunities, such as this. We would like to change, and the department, not the department, the state government. The department is quite easy on what the business you do, but it's the state government whom we have to get the approval before we go to. Can I sell my business in Sri Lanka and transfer the assets to Australia after the visa grant? Yeah, you can do that. You can do that, whatever the lawful means. And by the way, you don't have to wait till the visa grant. There are many people, as soon as they start applying for the visa and they know that now it's going to happen in about 1.5 years' time, they come to Australia, they start a business, and they open bank accounts. And so can a person offshore who has not got the visa open a business? Yes, you can, so long as you have one director who is usually residing in Australia. It doesn't have to be a permanent resident or citizen, usually residing in Australia. So yes, you could transfer the assets, and but many people don't. They keep, what is the percentage of business tax in Australia? Now, in Australia, there are different structures. There are sole ownership that you can have, and that would have certain, the first 20,000 is tax-free profit, and it'll go to 17% and 30%, 32% and 47%. But generally, a limited liability company, if my memory is right, is 27% of tax on profits after debtors' fees and so forth. Now, can I change the state after my visa grant? This is a very, very crucial question that a person has asked. That means you are sponsored by the state government of Victoria. You come to Victoria and suddenly say, no, I want to go to New South Wales. Not easy, but doable. You may have to have some very, very good reason why you want to change the state. And both the states have to agree. One state saying, okay, we let you go, we sponsored you, and we let you go. The other state have to say, we are willing to accept you on the 888 visa when it comes to the second stage, when you come to the permanent resident visa. And it has to be exceptional circumstances. Let's say that somebody came to Victoria and that business cannot be run, and they have plenty of opportunity in New South Wales. So you'll have to make a very, very serious business case, too, in order to change the states. It's a tricky question. Can I reside in a different state other than a nominated state, but run the business in the nominated state? Well, I strongly will advise against that. Maybe if your child has to go and study somewhere, that's fine. Um, and um, uh, that's fine, but it's expected for you to live in and reside in that state. That's why they sponsored you. How much amount for business visas? I'm sorry, Anjali, please be a little bit more specific. Please be a little bit more specific. I'm not too sure whether it is the cost of the visa or whatever it is. Yeah, please let me know, and I'm happy to answer that. What is the age limit for business migration at time of applying? Yeah, I did touch on this. It is 55 years of age, but exceptional circumstances can prevail. And those exceptional circumstances could be that you are bringing exceptional benefits to the state, much more than what a normal person brings in, or what that expectation will. Yes. Niranjan does have another question for me, and thanking for addressing questions. I hope, Niranjan, you've got those answers. One of the questions, please, since you mentioned about a bridging visa. Can we come to Australia on a visitor visa and submit the application and remain in Australia under a bridging visa till the decision is made by the government? Absolutely, can do that. However, you will have to be very mindful that when you apply for a holiday visa, there can be certain conditions that is imposed, conditions that will be imposed, that you will not be allowed to apply for another visa. That's called the no further stay. If that is so, then we can't. But at what time do they enforce it and what time? We really don't know. After 17 years of practice, I don't know what the department thinks when they put this condition and when they don't put the condition. Right. Is there a minimum residency requirement? I think the question is about how long you have to live in Australia. As I said, the department requires 50% of the time that you need to live in Australia during those 3 years that we're talking about, but state to state would be different. Victoria is very specific that you spend at least 46 weeks. So you take a holiday for 1.5 or perhaps 2 months, but you need to live in Australia for a long time. Not when I say long time, every year that you run this business. Yeah. Can I apply for an 888 being offshore? I need to check on that. There would be no impediments, but it is in your interest. There's no, see, you can look at it like this. There's no reason for you to be offshore and apply, because you're saying that you're not in Australia and you're not running this business. That can imply. So I would really think, even if during that time they had to be in the country, please come, apply, because otherwise you lose your tribunal review rights. Can I buy a business prior to the visa grant from the nominated state? Yes, you can. That's exactly what I did mention about the fact that that even before you get the visa, you can, people even before they have, but what happens is they can't come and run the business because they don't have a visa. But they could have somebody else running the business and coming and visiting and seeing, but that's not really running the business. Yes. How long will it take to obtain the business registration in Australia once I get the visa? Actually, you can get the business registration before you get the visa, but it's just about 1 day. That's why I said it's very conducive for business. You can get your form a company, put your name on the company, and ready to business, go to the bank, open the bank account, all in a couple of days' time. My son is 21 years old, some excellent questions, and studying in Australia. Can I include him in the 188 visa? Yes, you can. Any child under 18 years of age is considered a dependent. That's taken for granted. But any child between 18 and 23 years may be considered a dependent, so long as that child is dependent socially, emotionally, financially on the family. on the parents studying and the study costs and then full-time education. And once they get the 188 visa and they come to Australia, and then this child is 23, 25, or 26, that's fine. You can still apply for the 888 and be included in your parents' visa. Excellent question, Dinesh. Can we start a joint venture business 60-40? Both shareholders are applied for a 188. I believe you're referring to 888. So I think what you're saying is that when you come to Australia, two business 188 applicants, successful applicants, they get together and run a business 60-40. Unfortunately, you can run the business, but only one can apply. Only one can apply, and companies cannot be recycled. When I say you can't have a company where you use for business migration, you select to another business migrant, this happened in the past, and that person uses this company, no, that can't happen. They will find out. Nirosha asked me, can a student register a business with the student visa without much of an investment? Yes, you can. I think it's not really a business migration question, but yes, certainly a student can. All right, can I consider my overseas assets when I apply for a 888? Big no. That's, I think I mentioned before, certainly no. Only assets in Australia. They're not interested in what you're doing. Yeah. And you ask, what are the documents that I need to prove my turnover and assets? Look, it's a wide question. I mean, when you talk about turnover, it's we look at your financials and prove that your financials, and it has to be audited financials. And when it comes to assets, well, in the financial, if there are assets, that's fine, we can take that. But if it's land and building, we will get the valuers to value your property, and it's not the normal valuation. It will be a bit simpler version of saying, okay, in these years, this property was worth this amount, and supporting deeds, and if it's deeds and plans and so forth, if it's also land and building, if it's money in the bank account or fixed deposits to shareholders, it will be the bank balances confirmed from the bank, such things. And if it was the EPF and ETF balances, of course, you can get that confirmation on certain dates, and those are the sort of documentation that would prove. Would you have venture capitals or similar proposed for an entrepreneur level business plan? When you have ventured capitals or similar proposals for entrepreneur level, could you please, Richard, can you please rephrase? I'm trying to get my understanding. Would you have ventured capitals or similar proposals for an entrepreneur? Look, I don't, if you ask me that whether I get involved with, no, it's a conflict of interest. I should not be getting on like recommending businesses and so forth. When they find businesses, I'll only talk about the suitability. Yeah. But please, Richard, can you please rephrase in a slightly different way so I can help you with that question? I would like to have a recorded link of this session. Can it be done? It is actually will be appeared on Facebook and subsequently on YouTube. So I'm sure you would be able to get a copy and go through it. Right. Hi, what is the total cost for a business visa? By Kamal. Okay, I think I'll try to give you a sort of a very approximate. It changes. Let's talk about a family which has 2 children. Yeah, let's talk about a family which has 2 children and the main husband and wife applying. The total cost, which will include many aspects, the visa application fees, the state government sponsored fees, which will be up and down with certain what you call requirements, the professional fees, the business plans. So there's so many different types of costs. Could be approximately about 40,000 Australian dollars, but over about 1 to 1.5 years time, give and take 15% more or less. Right, Chaminda. It is a skill migration question, but I'm happy to answer it for you, Chaminda. It's 45 years. There are some very, very specific requirements for people who are over 45. Can my family members work for my own business Australia prior to applying for stability? Absolutely, they can. Oh, they can work. They expect the whole family to work. So it's a family business. But when it comes to those two employees, you can't use those employments, the family members, as because they are not permanent residents and they are not citizens. Yes. Me and my business partner in Sri Lanka planning to apply for a 188 visa to Australia. Can we jointly buy a business in Australia too? Yes, you can, but remember, as I said, only one person can use a particular business. The other business partner may have to have another business too. Yeah. Can I sell my businesses in Sri Lanka and go to Australia on a visit visa and apply for a business visa? Well, it's a very risky thing, Kamal. I would like you to wait till you get your visa, go through the entire process, and yes, you could. And many people do that, maybe selling part of it. All right, and Shamra has a question. If the husband is applying for the 888 visa and the business has two directors with the 50% shares, how would it work? Business is already registered in Australia. Yeah, so that's not a problem. You're collectively, you're going to have a shareholding of more than 30%, and husband and wife will hold shares. But we need to nominate a main applicant at the second stage, and that is where it is very important for that person to show that they've been involved with the business. Right. Niranjan, as if you open a business while in a visa, can we set up the business, sponsor overseas work under a 489 or other visas while 188 under process and awaiting? If you have not got the visa, when you come to Australia and you apply it on shore, you need to get work rights and so forth. It is because you're on a holiday visa and you're applying for another temporary visa, that's the 188A. So yes, you may run the business only when you get work rights. Only you can be involved with the business day to day. You can have ownership, that's fine, but running the business is a different thing. And the company can't sponsor somebody on the 489 visa, because 489 is a visa that by the way, 489 visa is no longer. It is. I think you're referring to 491 visa. That's a new visa. But a 491 visa means that it is something sponsored by the state. It's got nothing to do with the company. But you could sponsor somebody on a 494 visa, but then your business has to be regional. Yeah, like any other organization, you are allowed to sponsor. But remember, they have to prove that labor market testing, that's what we call it, the technical term. We have advertised, we can't find somebody, and that's why we are going to an overseas employee. If only business assets are available, will that be sufficient to meet the wealth? Yeah, of course. Yeah, a lot of people do meet their wealth requirement by having everything in the company. Their land and building is owned by the company. Their money is in the company. Yeah, not a problem at all. We got some excellent questions coming up. Arushat asks me, can I open a business in offshore and apply for a 188? In this case, will the approval of the visa would take normal time period, or can we put a bridging visa? Remember, to apply for a 188 visa, that you need to have run the business for 2 years, and that business can be run offshore or sometimes onshore. There are some specific situations where people have had businesses in Australia, but we have a situation. And did you have work rights? What sort of visa were you on? Did you were entitled to run a business? There are some visas. Let's talk about a student studying here in Australia gets a post-work visa for 3, 4, 5 years, and they run a business. Why not? Yeah, they can, but they have to prove that at the time of running the business, you had a proper visa. Yeah, and the normal time taken, yeah. Arusha, the normal time taken, it'll take that time, which is 1.5 years. Varuni, can I sell my business after granting the 888 visa, PR to a person holding a 188A visa? Lovely question. That's very good, but I think I've answered that question, Varuni. I said, yes, you can sell it to anyone, but that 188 visa holder cannot use that particular business to apply for 888. Why? It has been once used to get your 888. You can't recycle it. So there is of no use unless, of course, you're selling it to that person and for other reasons, but cannot be used to show the turnover of 300,000 and so forth. Right. Right. Excellent. Let's get as many questions as possible. For how long I have to own a business in Sri Lanka to apply for 188? Also, if I have losses in the last financial year due to COVID, will it still consider a successful business? I'll approach this question in two ways. One, a minimum of you have to own it for 2 years, but that's not good enough. You need to own for more than 2 years, but minimum is 2 years. So you have losses. So if you own the business for 2 years and you have losses, then the department will say you are not run a successful business. But excuse me, but there are some times we look at the financials and we see that the losses for people who are familiar with accounting, there is a loss figure, but you also have an expense figure of directors' fees. And directors' fees and shareholders' fees or whatever it is are actual profit that they have drawn out whilst the business is running. And if those directors' fees and director's salary or shareholders' salary, they have worked and as a salary, that collectively that amount is more than the loss, that means actually they made a profit. And out of the profit only they took those salaries. Because you charge those salaries, you made a loss. So we can have that argument. The other thing is that if you have a retained profit and you make a loss in a certain, we can justify saying, yeah, companies make profits and losses. Here we have a retained profit to absorb that loss. The rationale behind it is, are you running a business in a profitable manner, that you're not just loss-making, bankrupts and all that. By the way, bankrupts, if you have been bankrupt or you have been in liquidation, you'll have some serious concern to get visas. Right. If I'm applying for a 188 visa while on shore, can I come under a tourist visa? What if I get a no further stay? Yes, if you get a no further stay, you cannot apply. Can you revoke it? No, unless under very specific reasons, where you're seriously ill or something like that. Is a very rare occasion you can revoke it. And do they give 600 visa now? Yes, they do, but they're most countries, and especially Sri Lanka, they are, if a country is going through some difficulties, they would look at it more closely. I have more than 2.5 million Australian dollars assets, turnover of 1%. Certainly you will qualify. Of course, we want to know whether you're under 55 years of age and all the other things which add up to the points. Please contact us, Shivanka, and we will issue that questionnaire. Right. Myself and partner running a business at the moment in Sri Lanka, both of us need to apply for 188. Yes, you can. I said you can't recycle it at the 888, but to apply for the 188, yeah, both they run a business and but what is important is that, Dinesh, that you and your partner, business partner, I believe, because it's not a family unit, then show that you have been involved with the business and had management level experience in the business. Otherwise, you will not qualify. Yes, but if you own 50-50, why not? Yeah, because you own the minimum 30%. Right. So look, we have managed to answer a lot of very interesting questions. We'll keep the forum open for a few minutes more. Remember, there was a lot of interest from the Sinhalese newspaper that we ran this this ad, and if I'm quite happy to run this program in Sinhalese. If I speak in Sinhalese, වැඩමළුව සිංහලෙන් මේ කරගෙන යන්න මට කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. හැබැයි ඉංග්‍රීසි වචන පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕනේ සමහර වෙලාවට. ඒ වගේම මම හැමතිස්සෙම කියනවා ඉංග්‍රීසි knowledge එක improve කරගන්න ඕනේ. හැබැයි ඉංග්‍රීසි knowledge එක අත්‍යවශ්‍ය නැහැ business migration program එකට. Right. All right. I want to talk a little bit about I want to people come and tell me the reasons that they would want to. Obviously, sometimes they want to manage their risk. They want to diversify into another country. They would like to. Now there are entrepreneurs in the Middle East where they run very successful business, but their visas are really dependent on if they're running the business, and they would like to operate a business in Australia that they could then get permanent citizenship and then in retirement and so forth. If they feel Middle East is a beautiful place to run businesses, but if they want to retire into Australia, so they come and tell me that that's one of the reasons that they want to diversify. Then there are times where they feel uncomfortable with certain their opportunities. What they've been running in their countries may not prevail, and so they want to develop the country. They may want to develop new markets from their existing businesses in Australia. But one of the main reasons that people tell me is they want to educate their children in Australia as permanent resident citizens. I'll take an example. If you were to send your child from overseas as an international student, and say that their tuition fees will be, let's say for a year, let's say $50,000 to $60,000 for a good course, and what we are talking about is $40,000 to do the business migration program, run a business, family together, and they will qualify and they will go to university as permanent residents, and a lot of money is saved there. You can't even imagine. I mean, the whole business migration cost would be covered in perhaps 1 year in uni, and if you have many children, then you do the numbers. And they so they come here, they do their grade 8, 9, 10 or whatever it is. They get acclimatized and undertake their university education as permanent residents, which is generally about 1/6 of the cost of an international student. Right. So that's one of the main reasons that people, let's have some questions, Varuni. We have received a case officer after priorities of application of the 888 visa. We have asked for a section 56 additional texts, and we have submitted all of them today, so can use. So can we expect a news still in the priority process very soon? Look, I'm not able to specifically comment on this because I don't know to the level of supporting documentation you're given. I'm sure if you're working with a migration agent, he'll be the best person to advise you. But should you want to get a second opinion on where you stand, quite free to contact us. Right. Yes. The question is, can you combine overseas employer 482 visa and process with the 188 application onshore? Ranjan, I think that is not clear to me, that your question not clear at all. Can you combine with employer? 482 is an employer sponsored visa. 188 is a business migration visa. Right. So we are coming up to 1 hour and 20 minutes. I'm happy to answer a few more questions. I will also, in the meantime, share the screen and leave that on with our contact details, which if you can see in Australia, it will be in our offices in 180 Queen Street and Canawindra Close, and we have got a telephone number and email address, our Sri Lankan office, United Arab Emirates. So please feel free to make a note of if you were to interest, if you are in Australia, or you want to you're in Australia but you want to ask us some questions about on behalf of some relatives that you have in Sri Lanka or vice versa. And in Dubai, you could meet our country manager, Andrea Pereira, in just off it's new, and in the New Emirates Mall, and we have another office close to the Met. Yes, please, I'll keep that on. And let's go back to see whether we have any questions and answers. Yeah, yes. Okay. Koklas is the meeting recorded, as I said. Yeah, it will be, and it will be on Facebook as well as in YouTube. But if you have any specific questions, feel free to get in touch with us. Dinesh will ask, to success of a business, we need to bring a couple of skilled workers from Sri Lanka. Can we sponsor our locals for a specific time? Look, they can come for short periods of time, but if you want to sponsor them, they have to be having a skill set. They have to belong to an occupation which are in the subclass 482 list. Happy to discuss, because there will be some specific skill set that it's, so we can work with that. Yes. All right. So if I could, ask. Coming up to 1.5 hours. That's what we were planning. I hope you got the numbers, and I'll stop sharing and come back to my screen. And I'll check with the yes. Niranjan will ask, does the states only issue with treasure based on federal government quotas? Yes. And no, they won't. Potential refusals happen 1.5 to 2 years. So the quota in 1 year may not have got anything to do with a refusal in 2.5, 1 to 1.5 years time. Right. So look, I wish to thank you. It's been a long 1.5 hours. I hope that it was informative, that I presented it in an easy to understand manner. And I thank all the participants, and I also want to specifically thank the panel that has been answering lots of questions on Facebook, and in addition to all the questions that I have responded, they have been answering questions, and the technical team who has always tirelessly worked to get this webinar together. Look, I thank you very much. Please keep safe, take care, and hope you have a great weekend.